When Michael handed me the breakup settlement for the 19th time, I agreed. The girl he loves is clamoring for a formal relationship and can't wait any longer. I can't wait either. I'm pregnant, but the baby is not his. After signing the agreement, I took a photo and sent it to Michael. It's signed. Can you ask Assistant Jong to come and get it? 20 minutes passed quietly, and Michael's dialogue box was as quiet as death. I was thinking about whether to order a courier in the city, but I saw Michael standing at the door, panting slightly. He actually came in person. It was true that his little lover had been making a fuss for half a year in order to get a status. It seemed that he was really anxious. Michael said in a cold voice with a hint of impatience, "Tell me, what are you trying to do? I will give you everything I deserve." 3 years ago, Michael gave me a wedding. Since then, I have become Michael's wife in name only. I have accompanied him from poverty to success. But in the past 6 months, he has been thinking about how to dump me, just to make room for that little canary. He has revised the property division agreement to the 19th version. Before, I was not satisfied. This time I signed obediently, but he became suspicious. I chuckled and handed him the agreement. Michael opened it suspiciously, and when he saw that I had really signed it, his face darkened and he said in disbelief, "Olivia, do you really agree?" I looked at him strangely. He always said that he hated my ignorant and jealous behavior. Now that I didn't make a fuss, I took the money and left as he wished, but why did he seem even more unhappy? He couldn't have wanted to see me cry and try to keep him, right? I smiled and said, "Isn't this good? You can marry Elena openly, and I can replan my life." This time, the agreement included everything from a house, a car, and company shares. He had invested a lot of money. I accepted all the offers. After all, I was the one who accompanied him through those years of obscurity. Who would really be willing to work hard and let others reap the fruits of their labor? Now, with the money I have earned over the years and what he wants to share with me, even if I start traveling around the world tomorrow, it will be enough for me to live a rich life for the rest of my life. Although love is gone, fortunately I still have a lot of money. Michael listened to what I said, his eyes were complicated, and he was about to say something but stopped. At this time, a soft and tender female voice interrupted us. "Ms. Olivia, thank you for your willingness to help us. Elena, the canary that Michael cherishes in his heart. She is a golden phoenix that flew out of the mountain, with an ordinary second-tier university degree. It is not easy to enter the fiercely competitive Michael family group, and she became Michael's CEO's office secretary in just 3 months. She really works hard, in seducing Michael. Michael said she was innocent and kind, and was always afraid that I would bully her. But which innocent and kind person would sleep with a married man and send the bed photos to his wife? I used to be so depressed that I cried and made a scene. I even exposed them online in a fit of anger. But the next day, there was no trace left. Michael's methods were always quick and decisive. The funny thing is that one day, he would use these methods on me. I was already tired of all this trouble. I looked at the two of them with a half smile, not wanting to say anything more. "You've got the agreement, why don't you leave?" I ordered them to leave. "This villa is under my name." After Michael started to find lovers frequently, he rarely came back here. If they stayed for one more second, I would want to disinfect the whole house. Michael's face darkened, and then he said, "Olivia, playing hard to get doesn't work on me. Since you dare to sign, don't regret it." After that, he pulled Elena out. "Wait." I called Michael, and he turned around to look at me with an expression that said, "As expected." He probably thought I was reluctant to part with him again. But I just reminded him, "Don't forget to transfer the money as soon as possible, and transfer the real estate to me as soon as possible." Michael's expression froze for a moment, and then he gritted his teeth and said, "You are so anxious." I was anxious. How could I not be anxious? I was pregnant, but it wasn't his. If I didn't break up with him, it would be a mess. I made an appointment for a prenatal checkup, but I didn't expect to run into Michael and Elena in the hospital. He held her hand carefully, Elena chattered, and he listened patiently with a gentle and loving look in his eyes. They were so close that it seemed as if no third person could get in. Memories flooded back like a tide. A long time ago, he also treated me like a treasure. But it was too long ago. The last time he looked at me like that was when I had a miscarriage. At that time, I was 4 months pregnant. He had his first lover outside, a fearless girl. She came to my house in a hurry and asked me to make room for her. I scolded her for being shameless, but she said that the one who is not loved is the lover. Perhaps her self-esteem was greatly hurt. She pushed me hard, the child in my belly was gone. I was covered in blood and was sent to the operating room. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was Michael, who was blaming himself. His eyes were full of guilt. He held my hand tightly and choked with tears. I'm sorry, Olivia. I'm a bastard. You can hit me. I'm sorry. I slapped him hard, and he didn't even try to dodge. When I got tired of beating him, he said awkwardly, just this once, Olivia, give me a chance to make it up to you, okay? We can have a child together. He sent the girl away and became a caring lover again. Unfortunately, such days only lasted for a short 6 months. After 6 months, he had a new girl by his side. Later, those girls changed back and forth, young and tender faces, and before I could remember them, they were replaced by new faces. Elena was the one who stayed with him the longest. It was really awkward to run into them in the obstetrics and gynecology department. I turned around and wanted to leave, but was stopped by Elena's voice. Miss Olivia, what a coincidence. She hung on Michael like a big pendant, her face flushed, looking a little shy. I'm pregnant, come to see the doctor. I watched her performance expressionlessly. Michael saw the registration form in my hand and asked with a frown, what's wrong with you? I smiled coldly. Mr. Michael, it's best not to be too curious about your ex-wife's privacy in front of your new lover. He seemed a little annoyed, and he pushed Elena aside, grabbed my wrist, and asked loudly, Olivia, I am your man. You suddenly appeared in the obstetrics and gynecology department. I have the right to ask. I looked at him steadily, and couldn't help but respond with a hint of mockery in my tone, my man? Mr. Michael, are you sure? Although we had a wedding, I have always been unmarried in the marriage registration system. Michael was stunned for a moment, as if he suddenly remembered something. His eyes became more gloomy. Yes, the wedding was so romantic and grand. In the eyes of outsiders, I was his only wife, Michael. Especially in these years, our business and equity distribution have been intertwined. But who knows? In fact, we have never been to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Whenever I urged Michael and I to get the certificate, he was either going to a meeting or going on a business trip abroad. His time is always so precious that for 3 whole years, he couldn't spare half an hour to accompany me to get a marriage certificate. But when we broke up, we tore our faces over the issue of money and power distribution, and it became known to everyone. My wrist was so painful from his grip, but he refused to let go. Fortunately, not long after, the number calling machine called my name, Olivia, please go to the 5th clinic. Michael reluctantly let go of my hand. I immediately walked past him and Elena, entered the clinic, and locked the door, ignoring Michael's extremely dark face. After the doctor carefully read through my medical reports, he gave me some instructions and told me to bring the child's father along next time. He's dead. These words were like thunder. The doctor, who was originally concentrating on the medical records, quickly looked up with sympathy in his eyes. He changed his tone to comfort me and asked me to mourn. I also showed a sad expression. Maybe it was because of the early stage of pregnancy, I was a little sleepy. After returning from the hospital, I kept sleeping. In a daze, I had many dreams. At the beginning, I had just graduated from college, Michael's family went bankrupt, and he was living on the streets. He and I squeezed into a small rental house, and he hugged me, wrapped me in a down jacket, and leaned against his heart. Olivia, when I have money, I will never let you suffer again. I will have to hire at least 5 people, 1 to cook for you, 1 to wash your clothes, and 1 to fold your quilts. I could hear his vigorous heartbeat in my ears, and my face blushed at his sweet words. I naively believed that the love he talked about could withstand all difficulties. Later, he really made a comeback and became successful. However, there were more people around him. Those people came and went, just like the love that Michael could not grasp. At the end of the dream, there was a mess on the ground, broken porcelain pieces, blood on the soles of my feet, and I broke down and cried. He looked at me indifferently and said indifferently, Olivia, you are really ugly like this. At that moment, I looked at him, and the person I loved deeply in my youth seemed to have suddenly rotted away. When I woke up, it was already dark. I was in a daze and was about to get up, but a sudden voice startled me. I heard that you are pregnant with my child, and you spread rumors everywhere, saying that I am dead. I was startled and looked in the direction of the voice. I saw a man looking at me from the French window. The moonlight shone down, casting a layer of silver light on his dark suit. There was no light in the room, and he was hiding in the darkness. If he didn't speak, it would be hard to detect him. Rick, who are you trying to scare to death? You're going too far. Rick laughed at my words. He walked to the bed and pulled me into his arms. His warm body temperature came through the thin pajamas, and his palm gently caressed my lower back. When he spoke again, his tone was extremely helpless. Who is going too far? Olivia. First you slept with me and I ran away. Now, you want to take my child with you? Rick's guess was correct. My plan was to take the kids and settle down in a small town, far away from Michael and Rick. After all, Rick and I had an inglorious beginning. It was 3 months ago, on my birthday. Michael took the initiative to say that before we parted, he would spend one last birthday with me, for good luck and to part ways amicably. Michael had booked a restaurant early, and the window seat provided a panoramic view of the night scene. Michael came to pick me up at home as if nothing had changed between us. He brought me a cake and personally placed candles on it and lit them, make a wish. At Michael's urging, I followed his instructions and closed my eyes with mixed feelings, silently repeating in my heart, my wishes. It was only about 10 seconds, and when I opened my eyes again, I looked at the empty opposite side, feeling bewildered. Michael was gone. I waited for a long time, but he didn't come back. Finally, the waiter came to inform me, saying, Mr. Michael just took a phone call and left. He said that you can finish your meal and leave directly. He will pay for all your consumption today. I watched the candles on the cake burn out, the cream collapse bit by bit, and the words happy birthday turned into ugly red spots. Finally, I laughed sarcastically. After leaving the restaurant, I took a taxi to the port. When we were poor and had no money to travel to other places, Michael always liked to take me to the port. He always said that it was nice to be able to feel the sea breeze even if we couldn't see new scenery. Later, the sea was still the same sea, but people had changed a long time ago. I walked aimlessly for a long time until someone next to me suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my God, this is so romantic." I followed their gaze and looked at the night sky over the sea. On the dark sky, countless drone lights flashed, forming romantic cursive words, "Elena, I love you." A few seconds later, countless flowers bloomed in the night sky, gorgeous and beautiful. Passers-by sighed, "Oh my God, which rich second generation is showing love again?" Alas, today is another day for NPCs to make up the numbers in the world. I opened my moments almost in a self-torturing way. Sure enough, I saw Elena's boastful copy, "True love is that no matter what time it is, as long as I say I miss him, he will confess his love to me." The accompanying picture was the photo of the drone confession. When a person's heart is dead, he will become like a madman. I bought a lot of wine to drink. There were too many people on the beach. Michael and Elena were together, surrounded by passers-by who didn't know what was going on. They didn't notice me at all. I looked at them for a long time, until I found that there were empty bottles all around me and my vision began to blur. I realized that it was not good to drink anymore, so I stood up and staggered away. After finally leaving the bustling port, I walked along the road and bumped into someone head-on. "Be careful." He held my hand to steady me. I stood up and saw who it was. Rick, a Wall Street tycoon and the heir of the Rick family group. I have had some dealings with him over the years because of business investments. It can be said that 2/3 of my wealth was earned by relying on this big tree. Rick is the complete opposite of Michael, and there is almost no opposite sex around him. People in the circle always joke about whether he is gay, but he never refutes. "Olivia?" He held me, frowned, and then asked, "Why did you drink so much?" Rick smells nice and clean, unlike Michael who always smells of Elena's perfume. "Rick, they all say that you like men, is that true?" I asked, confused. My tongue was a little numb, probably because of the alcohol. Rick was stunned at first, then sighed helplessly and carefully helped me into his Rolls-Royce. Maybe he looked like me, maybe the alcohol had dulled my mind, or maybe I just wanted to take revenge on Michael in disguise. I quietly approached Rick and took the initiative to kiss him on the cheek. He turned his head and looked at me in astonishment. At that moment, his pupils trembled. His cold white skin was stained with a faint red. The next second, I was so bold that I sat on him. "Rick, do you want to try it with me?" We were too close, and my lips brushed his earlobe. It was so soft, so I just kissed it. His ears felt slightly hot, and his voice sounded above my head, a little hoarse, "Olivia, wake up." I smiled and said, "I'm sober. I know that you men all like young and beautiful women, and you can get rid of them with just one word, I'm bored." I felt dry all over my body, and subconsciously wanted to move towards a cooler place. His brows were slightly furrowed, and his eyes were dark. I raised my head again to kiss him. This time, he didn't dodge. His lips were icy and cool, and had a refreshing minty scent, which was very pleasant. I was almost suffocated by the kiss, but he held the back of my head with one hand and pinched my waist with the other, forcing me to continue. The baffle inside the car rose up at the right time, completely isolating it into an enclosed space. He finally let me go and said in a voice even hoarser than before, "Olivia. I don't like men, and I don't like young ones." His reaction time is really long. We've already kissed, why are you still talking about this? The alcohol didn't make me black out, but my mind was indeed a little confused. Before I could figure it out, Rick had already started the car. Soon, we arrived at our destination. Rick picked me up from the back seat and carried me across the living room of the villa. He quickly went upstairs to the bedroom, carefully put me on the bed, and stood by the bed looking down at me. My eyes were fixed on his lips, which I had just kissed. They were moist, with moisture, a little swollen, and red. I looked down and saw that he had unbuttoned 2 buttons on his shirt, exposing his collarbone to the air. He looked like a seductive male demon. He curled his lips, held my hand and put it under the hem of his shirt, and said ambiguously, "Olivia, do you want it?" "Yes, I want to." After getting a satisfactory answer, Rick leaned down and kissed my lips. Unlike the previous 2 times, this time he kissed me deeply and hard, as if he wanted to vent his strong possessiveness. The hot kiss went all the way down. "Olivia, do you like it?" My face was almost cooked, and I could only cling to Rick tightly. At first I bit my lips desperately and didn't answer, but in the end I was defeated by Rick's attack. I buried my face in his neck and whimpered, "I like it."
Yeah.
He kissed me with satisfaction. Finally, I fell asleep in his arms. When I woke up the next day, he was gone. I understood what he meant. He must be a person who is afraid of trouble. Coincidentally, I am also afraid of trouble. Since he is gone, I naturally have to pretend that nothing happened. This is good for both of us. So I left, and blocked all his contact information to avoid embarrassment. As for business dealings, I will let the people below handle it in the future, and just do it in a business-like manner. Rick and I haven't seen each other since then. It wasn't until a few days ago when my period was delayed that I realized that I didn't take birth control pills after that incident. I secretly bought a pregnancy test stick and took it 5 times in a row. Every time it showed 2 lines. I was confused. After my last miscarriage, the doctor said that it would be difficult for me to get pregnant again. Where was the difficulty? How did Rick get it right the first time? I was confused. Logically, Rick had the right to know. But thinking back to his attitude that day, I was not sure. Just in case, I said nothing and just prepared to separate from Michael as soon as possible and plan for the future of me and my child. Unfortunately, before I could make any arrangements, Rick showed up. "Olivia, why did you block me?" His lips were close to my ears, his voice was cold, but the warm breath overflowed from his lips and teeth. "You are not regretting it after sleeping with me, right?" Rick's attitude made me a little dumbfounded. I didn't expect that he would care so much about me blocking him. In order to avoid more misunderstandings, I decided to make it clear, "Rick, we are all adults. I was the one who started it that night, so I understand that I have to bear the consequences myself. You can check the hospital, so you should know. I will definitely keep the child. I have money, and I can take care of raising the child myself, and it won't cause you any trouble. If you are really worried, we can sign a confidentiality agreement." Rick, who was kissing my earlobe, suddenly froze and lowered his voice. "You do it yourself. What if the child asks about his father? What if he wants to see a picture of his father? I have thought about this carefully. I will tell the child that his father is dead. The photo can be synthesized by AI, and as for the cause of death, just say it was a car accident. If you are not satisfied, you can also make up a more decent way to die. Of course, if you want to see the child in the future, it doesn't matter. Just let him call you uncle." Rick frowned at first, but when he heard the last part, he was so angry that he laughed. "Call me uncle? Olivia, what do you think I am?" I choked, not quite sure what he meant. How come I had even thought of a way out for him, but he was still not satisfied? "Rick, I just feel bad to trouble you too much. After all, you left so decisively that day." As I spoke, I observed Rick's expression and thought about other possibilities. Could it be that he changed his mind after knowing that I was pregnant and wanted to snatch custody of the baby from me? Rick took several deep breaths before he said helplessly, "I don't think you're a problem." I was slightly stunned, and another absurd guess came to my mind. Rick looked at me deeply and explained seriously, "That day, there was a problem with the project of my French branch, and I had to go there in person to deal with it. I left you a note, asking you to wait for me to come back. So, you didn't see anything at all." "A note?" I didn't see it. In this technologically advanced age, why would he write a note? Besides, I was too embarrassed to think about it. I just wanted to run away. How could I have the energy to check if there was a note on the bedside table? Rick continued to accuse, "When I wanted to contact you again, I found that you had blocked all my contact information. Olivia, am I something shameful in your eyes?" I laughed awkwardly. "That's serious. But we can't just get married after sleeping together. He lowered his eyes and asked in return, why is it impossible? My eyes suddenly widened, and I asked in disbelief, are you serious? Rick, do you like children so much? Rick looked at me for a long time with deep eyes, a little lazy, and said in a deep voice. Just think that I like children. Of course, I didn't agree to Rick's request. This was ridiculous. Michael and I had gone from loving each other to hating each other. We had been entangled for so many years, but the ending was not happy. I didn't want to jump into another siege so easily. Rick didn't force me. He just watched me add his contact information back and told me to be sure to notify him when I went for my next prenatal checkup. I frowned and said, is this necessary? I don't know if it was an illusion, but there seemed to be a sense of gnashing teeth in his smile. Didn't you say I like children? How could someone who likes children let you go for a prenatal checkup alone? Okay. I respect Rick's rights as a biological father. Moreover, he is the cash cow of my business. I have to give him some respect. Since then, Rick has been concerned about my food, clothing and diet, and has also bought me baby supplies. Once, when he was on a business trip to Europe, he even personally brought back a crib that was custom-made by a master. The crib was also filled with all kinds of diapers, milk powder and baby cream. He seemed to be really looking forward to the arrival of the baby. Gradually, as time went by, I got used to it. It wasn't until half a month later when Rick and I ran into Michael at the auction. Elena held Michael's hand, with a look of pride in her eyes. We hadn't seen each other for a long time, and when Michael saw me standing next to Rick, he was stunned for a moment. He opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something to me. But Elena didn't give him the chance. Elena said coquettishly, honey, I'm a little tired, come sit over there with me? Before leaving, she didn't forget to look back, leaving me with a mocking smile. I ignored it. After all, I was pregnant and I had to stay away from these nausea sources as much as possible. The exhibits at this auction were quite ordinary, and I was not interested. Until I saw a necklace. The collection was very beautiful, and it was one that I had liked many years ago but had never been able to buy. The starting price was $800,000. I was the first to raise my bid. Elena followed me and kept bidding. $1 million. $1.5 million. Finally, Michael raised his hand, $3 million. He knew that I had wanted this necklace for a long time, but he still wanted to snatch it from me and deliberately gave it to Elena. I looked in their direction and happened to see Elena's smug expression. I knew that Elena might not like it very much, she just didn't want to see me suffer. $3 million, first time. $3 million, second time. I didn't raise my sign again. Rick squeezed my hand and tried to raise the price. 500. Before he could finish his words, I quickly grabbed him and said, 5 what 5, are you crazy? His expression was a little innocent. $5 million is not expensive, don't you like it? I sneered, why isn't it expensive? You just haven't been poor. Only those who have been truly poor know that $5 million is really expensive. When people are in desperate situations, they may fight for $500, not to mention $5 million. But Rick, who is out of touch with the world, probably finds it difficult to empathize with this truth. I shook my head. Don't argue. I don't like losing money. The $3 million Michael offered is far more than the value of the necklace itself. If he wants to be a sucker, let him be. Anyway, Michael has already signed the property division agreement. The money he spends now is all his share. Although $3 million is not a lot, it adds up. I hope he gets poorer and poorer. $3 million, third time. Deal. The hammer fell, meaning the auction was over. After the auction, the crowd filed out. Elena walked up to me on purpose and started to show off. Ms. Olivia, are you angry? It's all because of IU. I just don't care when I see that I like it. I'll lend it to you to have a look. Michael, who was beside her, watched this scene in silence. Michael really doted on Elena, allowing her to show off in front of me again and again. I curled my lips slightly. No, I don't like it that much. If you like it, take it. After all, what's good about the things you like? I glanced at Michael beside her meaningfully. Michael's face darkened visibly, and he said angrily, Olivia, why are you like this? It's just a necklace, is it necessary to be so sarcastic? At worst, I can compensate you with one later. I looked up for a moment, then looked at him steadily. No need, like you said, it's just a necklace. I don't need it. Michael choked for a moment, and then he seemed to finally remember something. I am a jewelry designer. When he founded his company, he got his first pot of gold from me selling my design copyrights, which gave him $1 million. At that time, Michael hugged me with red eyes and said that he would buy me a lot of jewelry in the future. Unfortunately, in the end, he only gave me an ordinary ring. I was Michael's girlfriend for 4 years and his nominal wife for 3 years. He used a small diamond to cheat me of my most precious 7 years. A promise is sincere only when it is spoken. But sincerity is something that changes rapidly. In the end, love is a long and arduous journey, and it all depends on conscience. Now, Michael has his own company and I have my own business. My jewelry design brand has become world famous. I can buy whatever I like. I don't need him anymore. Michael seemed to be thinking about the past and was a little absent-minded. When he looked at me again, there was a bit of guilt and nostalgia in his eyes. At this moment, Rick's tall figure suddenly intervened, completely blocking Michael's gaze from me. His voice was lazy, but full of sarcasm. "Mr. Michael, I haven't seen you for a few years. Your taste has changed. Do you drink green tea instead?" When talking about green tea, Rick glanced at Elena lightly. Elena tried hard not to explode, but the expression on her face was almost distorted. I was too lazy to read on. "Rick, let's go." My action of calling his name in public seemed to please Rick. He curled up the corners of his mouth and smiled. "Yeah." I thought that everything would end here and I would be at peace. But Michael suddenly changed his mind. I have a habit of muting my phone when I go to sleep. When I woke up that day, the screen showed more than 30 missed calls and 99 plus WeChat messages, all from Michael. "Olivia, let's talk. I'll go find you. No one is home. Where are you? What disease did you go to the hospital's obstetrics and gynecology department for last time? Are you pregnant? If you are pregnant, I can promise you that we will not separate. If you don't reply, I will wait for you at the door. Olivia, why were you not at home all night? Why did you even fire the maid?" Because I had moved out a long time ago. There were traces of him living in that house, and I was not happy living there, so I just sold the house. When Rick found out, as the father of the child, he offered me an island villa as a favor, and also hired a private doctor and nurse. The island has a beautiful environment and a pleasant climate, which is especially suitable for pregnancy. I didn't refuse. Anyone who refuses this kind of thing is a fool. Since Rick wants to enjoy the rights of being a father, he naturally has to spend some money. This is called equal exchange. Rick and I have gradually developed this kind of tacit understanding. As for Michael, according to the agreement, he still has a lot of property that has not been transferred to me. How can I regret it at this time? I immediately returned the call. Michael's voice came from the receiver, tired and a little hoarse. "Olivia, I asked the previous servants, and they said they noticed that you were taking medication to preserve pregnancy. If it's true, then we cannot separate for now." I suddenly lost my patience. When people are unlucky, even taking medicine can be secretly watched by the servants and reported. Fortunately, I know that truth will come out sooner or later, so I was mentally prepared. Before Michael could finish, I interrupted him calmly. "I am pregnant." "But Michael, who said the child is yours?" There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I could almost hear Michael's rapid breathing. After a while, he asked coldly, "Olivia, what do you mean?" When Michael finally found me, I was playing with Egg Yolk. Egg Yolk was a little yellow dog that Rick adopted for me because he was afraid I would be bored. It was gentle and friendly, and loved to lie at my feet and bask in the sun. Michael was stunned when he saw me. "You are really here." If I remember correctly, the properties here should all be under the name of Rick's family. He stared at my stomach as if he wanted to stare a hole in me. "When exactly did you?" I tilted my head and smiled, then told him, "Remember my birthday? The night you left halfway and used a drone to confess your love to Elena." Michael stared at me with eyes wide open in disbelief. Finally, he said in a trembling voice, "Olivia, we haven't even separated yet, and you've already cheated on me?" In his eyes, it seemed like I was the betrayer who made a mistake and should be blamed. I couldn't help but laugh sarcastically and asked him, "So over the years, when you had so many lovers around you, and when you were having sex with Elena and got her pregnant, did you ever think of me?" He knew he was in the wrong and couldn't argue. He stood there for a long time before he reluctantly said, "Olivia, if you abort the baby, we won't make a fuss anymore. I'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau with you to get the marriage certificate, we'll get married, and live a good life in the future, okay?" I was so angry that I laughed. I stared into his eyes without blinking. "Abort? Do you think it's possible? I had a miscarriage before, and the doctor said it would be difficult for me to have a child again. Have you forgotten why I had a miscarriage? What qualifications do you have to decide whether my child stays or goes away?" Michael's body swayed, and pain flashed in his eyes. "Okay. Then give birth to the baby." When you are better, we can have another child of our own, okay? I felt like I had just heard a huge joke. I couldn't help but look at Michael like he was mentally ill and said, "Do you want to listen to what you are saying?" With red eyes, he made a final concession, "Olivia, for you, I can recognize this child." At this moment, a low sneer came from not far away. It was Rick. He loosened the top button of his shirt and spoke lazily and mockingly, "You want my child to call you dad? Michael, are you worthy?" For a moment, the atmosphere was tense. The moment Michael saw Rick, he rushed up like crazy. "Rick. It's you." Unfortunately, he was stopped by the bodyguards in the villa before he could fight with Rick. He probably forgot whose house this was. Michael's eyes turned red, and he tried to break free from the bodyguard and fight with Rick. But the reality was cruel. The bodyguard threw him away, and he fell to the ground in a mess. Rick just sat on the sofa with his legs crossed, looking at him expressionlessly, his face as cold as frost and snow. "Do you want to get out by yourself, or do you want me to have you thrown out?" I was a little surprised. Although Rick was of noble status, he was always praised for his good manners. Even when facing business rivals, he never lost his temper and humiliated anyone. This was the first time I saw him so angry. Michael came alone, and even though he was unwilling, it was useless. He looked dejected, staggered to his feet, and handed a box to me. I didn't open the blue velvet box, but I roughly guessed what was in it. It was the necklace that Elena had stolen and that I had been longing for a long time. He lowered his head and told me, "Olivia, I didn't really want to take away your favorite things on the day of the auction. I just wanted to make you jealous and make you submit to me. I'll get the necklace back for you, and I'll ask Elena to abort the baby. Don't you like this necklace very much? Let's get back together, okay?" Yes. I used to like it so much. Michael knew it, but he still helped Elena and hit me in the face with it. He also knew that every time I cried to him, I was very sad. But he still hurt me again and again. I said calmly, "I don't like it now. I don't like either the necklace or you." Michael's face turned pale. "Olivia, stop being so stubborn, okay? Are you really willing to part with me? I just find it ridiculous. He was the one who hurt others the most in the beginning. Why is he acting like he is the victim now?" I looked at Michael's red eyes, pulled the corner of the clothes out of his hand, and said seriously, "Michael, you ruined everything with your own hands. If you want to break up thoroughly, and don't let me look down on you again." 3 days later, Michael and I completed the final property transfer at the notary office. Michael looked extremely haggard, with a dark blue spot under his eyes, and he obviously didn't sleep well. However, whether he is living a good or bad life now has nothing to do with me. At the moment we parted ways, Michael seemed to have something to say to me. But before he could say it, Elena suddenly appeared. Her face was completely devoid of the gentleness she usually pretended to have, and instead, she was filled with anger and unwillingness. "Michael. She already has someone else's child, why are you giving her so much? I thought you were just giving her a breakup fee. But why did you even transfer the 80 million villa to her? Have you ever thought about me and the child in your belly?" I frowned slightly. Elena may not know that what Michael gave me was not just a simple breakup fee. Every business he had done and every profit he made had my shares in it. Without me, how could he be where he is today? I just got the part one deserved. Moreover, Elena was too impatient. Michael's love was overwhelming but short-lived. Her gentle and loving wife image collapsed too quickly, which was not a good thing. "Olivia, don't try to take advantage of me." Elena accused me madly and rushed up regardless of anything. "That's enough." Michael shouted angrily, stopped her, and said angrily, "Are you done yet? Don't embarrass yourself here." Elena was yelled at and her body froze. Her eyes instantly turned red. She threw the LV bag in her hand at Michael fiercely. "Shame on you? How could you yell at me? You've already broken up with her, do you still want to protect her?" More and more people gathered around. Michael looked more and more annoyed, and finally burst out, "Even if I don't marry Olivia, I won't marry you." Elena was stunned by the shouting. The next second, she realized something and ran after him in panic, trying to hold Michael's hand. But Michael had an indifferent expression on his face and threw her aside forcefully. "Stay away from me." The accident happened at this moment. Elena loved dressing up and she didn't shy away from it after she got pregnant. She continued to walk in her exquisite sheepskin high heels. She liked to use them to show Michael's love for her. But Michael's swing caused her to miss her step, and she rolled several times and fell down the stairs. She fell to the ground, her face pale as she clutched her stomach and begged for help in pain. "My baby. Michael, my stomach hurts so much." Michael panicked when he saw this, and his face looked very ugly. About 4 or 5 seconds later, bright red blood flowed between Elena's legs. My heart trembled when I saw it. In the past, the child that Michael and I had was gone just like that. Was it God's will? People who are promiscuous and unfaithful are destined to have shallow kinship. Or maybe the baby could sense in the mother's body that he was not loved by his father, so he left sadly. Even if the world is good, it doesn't want to come back. After Elena's disturbance, the news about Rick and I finally reached Rick's family. The next day, Rick's grandfather ordered Rick to return to the old house and specifically asked to see me. In the car, I couldn't help but feel nervous. Rick comforted me, saying that his grandfather was easy to talk to. I believed him. But the old man's brows never relaxed since he entered the door. Although the old man is already 80 years old and needs to walk with crutches, he has a majestic face and a natural aura of a superior. He narrowed his eyes and said in a tone that brooked no refusal, "Kneel down." The majestic voice resounded throughout the hall. Rick took off his suit jacket without saying anything and knelt straight down. Even I, who was following behind him, was shocked. This? Should I kneel down too? I was full of questions. As soon as Rick's grandfather saw me, his attitude changed 180 degrees. He walked towards me with a kind smile and said, "Girl, don't be nervous. Sit down. Grandpa is not a bad person. Grandpa just wants to help you teach this stinky grandson who bullied you a lesson. Just sit on the sofa and watch." I was supported by Rick's family's housekeeper and sat down with a confused look on my face. The moment Rick met my gaze, he slightly curved his lips, signaling me not to be offended. It seemed that Rick was used to kneeling, so he should be able to handle it. I still overestimated him because the next second, he said, "Grandpa, Olivia is sitting down, so I shouldn't kneel down either." It would have been better if he hadn't said anything. As soon as he opened his mouth, the old man exploded. The next second, he picked up his walking stick and hit him on the back without mercy. "You bastard. You still have the nerve to talk nonsense. Have you forgotten the family motto? I introduced so many people to you, but you refused to meet them. What happened? You turned around and slept with a good girl. It's a misfortune for your family." While cursing, the old man beat him harder. I was shocked by this scene. What era is this? There are still people using family rules. Rick is a man who can call the shots outside, but when he comes home, he has to kneel down and be beaten. I tried to plead, "Well, Rick's grandfather, actually, this is not Rick's fault. I was drunk that time and I was the first to." Before I could finish, Rick's grandfather interrupted me, "Don't beg for mercy. You've been drinking, and what about him? If he didn't have any bad intentions, would you have been able to accomplish this? It's obvious that this little bastard is taking advantage of your misfortune. I'll teach him a lesson." Rick's grandfather was serious when he beat people. After more than 10 blows, Rick's white shirt was faintly seeping with blood. I quickly stopped the old man's walking stick and said, "Stop beating him." Rick's grandfather refused and tried to take the cane back. During the shoving and pushing, Rick, who had been kneeling obediently, suddenly stood up and protected me behind him. "Grandpa, you can hit me, but don't push Olivia. She is pregnant." As soon as he finished speaking, Rick's grandfather's hand suddenly stopped in midair. After being confused for a few seconds, his eyes suddenly lit up. "Child? Are you saying that I'm going to have a little great-grandson?" Rick was stunned. "You called me back to get beaten, but you still don't know that she is pregnant?" Rick's grandfather shook his head in confusion. It turned out that he had only heard the general idea and didn't know that I was already pregnant with Rick's child. I came to Rick's family this time with full preparation to discuss the custody of the child. But after listening to the whole story, the old man asked me directly when I would hold the wedding with Rick. Sir, are you changing too fast?" I had to explain. "Sorry, Rick's grandpa. I don't have any plans to get married for the time being." When Rick's grandfather heard this, he was silent for a moment, then glared at Rick with a look of disappointment on his face. "You little bastard, what are you doing? How come you haven't even caught up with your wife?" He said this without avoiding me at all. I turned my head away in embarrassment. But I heard Rick smile. "Well, I'm too stupid. I'm already pursuing her. I'll work harder." That night, Rick's grandfather arranged for us to stay in the old house. He even deliberately said that there were not enough rooms for us to sleep in, so he put me and Rick in one bedroom. The old man's thoughts were written all over his face. The bedroom was decorated in a simple black and white style. It was Rick's private room. Rick took off his bloody shirt and asked me to apply medicine on him. His skin was very white, and the bruises and wounds were particularly glaring. I took the ointment and rubbed it on him carefully. My fingertips touched the skin on his back and it felt hot, just like his body temperature. Rick suddenly spoke in a hoarse voice, "Grandpa is always looking forward to my marriage. He is a little overly enthusiastic. Please don't be offended." I said, to show my understanding. Old people always hope to have many children and grandchildren. After applying the medicine, I took a long breath and looked around the room casually. Suddenly, a pair of cufflinks on the cabinet caught my attention. Why do they look so familiar? I walked over and took it in my hand, feeling extremely shocked. "Rick, how did you get this pair of cufflinks?" Rick's eyes swept across the cufflinks, then fixed on my face. He was silent for a few seconds before he lowered his eyelashes slightly. "You gave it to me." I looked at him in disbelief. "How could that be? I sold these cufflinks 8 years ago." Rick pinched the cufflinks, took a deep breath, and seemed to have made sufficient mental preparations before he began to explain. 8 years ago, a girl who had a stall in front of the university sold me this pair of cufflinks. The cufflinks have 6 blue and white diamonds in total, and the details are exquisite, no worse than those of luxury brands, but she only sold them to me for 800 yuan. She said that she designed it herself. It's not a big brand, and it's not worth much. She sold it to raise money to buy her boyfriend a new phone. Rick raised his eyes and laughed at himself. At that time, I thought she was pretty, but a little silly. During that time, I often passed by that street and could always see her selling things at a stall. If she didn't have a boyfriend, I would definitely pursue her. Later, she graduated and I went abroad. I thought we would never meet again. But a few years later, her works appeared at a global jewelry auction. Later, she found me with her own jewelry brand. I watched her walk towards me step by step, and the feeling of being moved was rekindled. In the past few years, my upbringing has been reminding me that she has someone in her heart and I must not disturb her. Until that night, she suddenly stumbled and fell into my arms. As night fell, the lights in the room dimmed slightly. The night breeze blew through the window screens of the old house, bringing a gentle coolness. Rick's tone became softer and softer. "That night, you took the initiative to kiss me. Olivia, tell me, how could I let go again?" I listened to all this in a daze, while Rick had already held my face and kissed me hard. Later, I gave birth to a cute daughter. Rick has always been by my side, but I have been reluctant to accept his proposal. There is no special reason, but I don't want to be trapped in a relationship again. Only when you are really in a cage, you will know the value of freedom. What's more, love and marriage are never the same thing. I dare not easily enter the game again. My daughter has my last name, Chloe. I accompanied Chloe from the time she learned to speak to the time she entered school. Before I knew it, another 7 years had passed. When people talk about Rick, they say that he has changed from a young and handsome gay boss to a golden bachelor. Rick always clarifies to the public again and again, "I am not gay, nor am I single. I have a girlfriend. I also have a daughter. My daughter is so beautiful." Rick's grandfather was in good health, but he would often say to him, "Yes, you have a girlfriend and a daughter, but you don't have a wife. Your daughter even calls you uncle." Rick. Chloe knew Rick was her father since she was little. But she was too attached to me. Every time Rick came over, he would sleep with me, even more attached than a child. Chloe could only be coaxed away by her grandmother. So Chloe deliberately called him Uncle Rick. Uncle Rick was wronged by his daughter, so he came to me pitifully at night. He hugged me and kissed me again and said in a very resentful tone, "Olivia, you have no conscience. When will you give me a name?" He pinched my waist and poked his abdominal muscles lazily. "It depends on your performance tonight. It also depends on my mood tomorrow." Rick muttered that I would only write him a bad promise. The next second, he buried his head and kissed me even more fiercely and vigorously. Later, I heard from a friend that Michael had died. After Elena miscarried, she kept pestering Michael and refused to let go. She threatened Michael to marry her and take care of her for the rest of her life. Michael had long been tired of her and naturally refused to compromise, and even wanted to fire her from the company. Elena was desperate and took advantage of her position to leak company secrets to the rival company and secretly uncovered many accounting problems of the company. Michael was so frustrated by her that he lost several big business deals. Later, he couldn't hold on, the capital chain broke, and the company went bankrupt. He hated Elena so much that they had a fierce argument. In anger, he accidentally pushed her down the stairs. Perhaps he felt that the future was bleak and he was desperate, so Michael jumped down himself. After hearing this, I just casually agreed, "I see." I felt no more emotion. After so many years, hearing the name Michael again seemed like something from a lifetime ago. My friend was still sighing. "You said, you two were so good at school. I still remember Michael brought you lunch every day, gave you extra lessons, and couldn't live without you for a day. At that time, the whole girls' dormitory knew how much he loved you. How could such a good person end up like that, quietly? I listened quietly, as if I was listening to a stranger. Mom, come and play. Not far away, my daughter waved at me. Rick was playing frisbee with his daughter and the dog. I hung up the phone in a hurry, took the frisbee from my daughter, and threw it far away. The dog was running freely, and my daughter was laughing happily. Rick looked over at me. That glance. The features are gentle. The years are quiet and good. End of text. Michael's perspective. After they broke up, Michael secretly visited Olivia 3 times. The first time was in the hospital. He was very troubled by Elena's harassment at that time, and his long-term smoking and drinking had completely ruined his body. He had a stomachache and was admitted to the hospital. When the pain was unbearable, Michael would always think of Olivia unconsciously. In the past, when he was drunk, even if he frowned a little, Olivia would worry if he was uncomfortable. If he vomited, Olivia would be even more distressed. He always thought that Olivia, who loved him so much, would never leave him in this life. But now, he had gastric bleeding and was in excruciating pain, but even hearing her voice had become a luxury. Olivia had deleted his WeChat a long time ago. Fortunately, the chat history was still there. He listened to the voice messages she had sent him in the past almost morbidly. Husband, come pick me up after get off work, Mua. By the way, can you take some time this year to go to Iceland with me to see the northern lights? Michael, happy birthday, Mr. Michael. You are not allowed to work overtime tonight. And you are not allowed to complain that the cake I made is ugly. Her breath seemed to be close to his ears, playful, sweet, and angry. He deliberately ignored the endless quarrels later, and her crying and questioning whether he still loved her. After losing her, he realized that it was not that he was tired of Olivia. It was that Olivia had long been integrated into his bones and blood, just like oxygen. It seemed that he was unaware of it, but in fact he could not get away from it. Later, by chance, he saw Olivia in the obstetrics and gynecology department of the same hospital. Olivia came for a prenatal checkup. Rick accompanied her throughout the whole process. A big man in a suit and tie, he served a pregnant woman while running around himself. At that moment, Michael used up all his strength to resist the urge to run to her to confess and beg. In order not to disturb her again, he fled in embarrassment. The second time he met Olivia was 3 years later. At that time, his company was in trouble and he was running around looking for funds. When he passed by the big screen in Times Square, he saw her jewelry advertisement. She was a designer with both business and artistic acumen. In the past few years, his career had stagnated, and she had already left him behind. Michael saw Olivia standing under the big advertising screen, wearing a bright red dress. It seemed like she was participating in some commercial activity and taking photos with the reporters. She was really pretty. But he looked so embarrassed, as if he could never catch up with her. Michael's eyes turned red in silence. The third time I saw Olivia was at the playground. It was a sunny day. Rick held his daughter's hand with one hand and held a parasol for Olivia with the other. The 3 of them were wearing cute parent-child outfits. The little girl laughed and called Rick Uncle Rick at first. Then, somehow, she suddenly changed her tone and called him Dad. Rick seemed to be stunned, and repeatedly confirmed with the girl, Chloe, what did you call me? Can you call me a few more times? Quick. The little girl was a little shy, but with Olivia's encouragement, she finally hugged Rick happily. I call you Daddy. Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. What, don't you want to be my daddy and continue to be my Uncle Rick? Rick didn't know why, but he seemed to be so happy that he almost cried. Michael, on the other hand, stood in an inconspicuous corner, watching the scene with jealousy. At that time, his company had already gone bankrupt. Elena was like a cancer, torturing him to the point where he would rather die than live. He was so jealous that Rick could get Olivia. He regretted it even more. They will have children and wear parent-child clothes. How nice it would be if there was a time machine in the world. Then he could travel back to the time before he hurt Olivia. She would still be his Olivia. Unfortunately, all this became a delusion. Elena came to bother him again. This time, during the argument, Elena threw his old phone from more than 10 floors down. The phone broke into pieces. Michael was completely crazy. The phone contained voice messages that Olivia had sent him in the past. For so many years, he had never been willing to delete them. Every sleepless night, he had to rely on those voice messages to quench his thirst. But Elena destroyed it. At that moment, his sanity was completely devoured. He pushed Elena down. Go to hell, he said to Elena, and to himself. His body flew into the air, and at the moment of falling, the whistling wind passed by his ears. Olivia, if I'm gone, will you think of me occasionally? Forget it, just forget it.